Okay, I'm back and I'm continuing with our discussion on logical fallacies. And last logical fallacy we looked at was false dichotomy. And so now what we'll do is look at 11, which is otherwise known as hasty generalization. Now, hasty generalization fallacy is one of the more interesting ones, and the reason why is because it also is a way in which we understand truth. And so, in other words, it's a way in which we are logically understanding things in general, and then it's also a problem of logic. So it has kind of like this do-all way in which we are looking at it. So hasty generalization is quite possibly the most common type of fallacy. So part of the reason why it's widespread is so widespread is due to the fact that it's related to the ways in which we understand things at the most basic level. To understand things, we simply are understanding things generally in a generalized way. And so, in other words, this is a necessary part of our cognition. In other words, in order to understand things, we need to have a general understanding of them before we could look at specifics. And so, in this way, we could see it also as problematic, given that the devil is in the details and in the specifics. So in other words, hasty generalization is at the heart of racism, misogyny, homophobia, ageism, body shaming, snobbery, arrogance, classism, and so forth. But yet at the same time, we also need to generally understand things and people in order to understand them to begin with. And so it has problems. And then also too, just reading these off, I'm noticing that it wouldn't be just restricted to problems that we're having with people. We could also have these overgeneralizations when we're considering objects and or ideas. Okay, so I want to amend this because I'm also noticing a typo here, so we'll take it from there. So this type of generalization, hasty generalization, I have an example of all Coloradoans love skiing. Therefore, anyone who lives in Colorado is an avid skier. So that's obvious to see that there's exceptions to this rule, and those exceptions are specific people who don't necessarily like skiing, right? Or who have never skied in their lives. Okay, then 12, we have the logical fallacy post hoc ergo propter hoc. So this is otherwise known as the post hoc fallacy. So this word means after this, therefore because of this. So this type of fallacy is a way to suggest that because two things happen coincidentally or in close chronology, they are connected and one event must have caused the other. So the example is, I was short with this person at the gas station, premise 1, and then later I got stung on the lip by a bee. And then the conclusion is the bee sting is warning me to keep my mouth shut. So in other words, you have a conclusion that happens to be in close conjunction with something I was feeling strongly about. And so because there's this proximity in terms of one event happening after another, I immediately draw a conclusion or a coincidental conclusion between the two and take it from there, and hence the fallacy. The next fallacy is number 13, reductio ad absurdum. This word means reduction to absurdity. So this type of fallacy is a way in which we claim that the logical conclusion of some truth or falsity is true or false, because the contradiction cannot be true or false. So this isn't always a logical fallacy per se. It's also a sort of logical proof, similar to generalizing as well. So in other words, generalization has a type of truth to it that we need to recognize, and so does reductio ad absurdum. So Aristotle's principle of non-contradiction is a reductio ad absurdum argument. Something cannot both be true and not true at the same time. So with this type of argument, we have free speech is a constitutional right. We only have one premise there. And the conclusion is I should have the right to voice anything I want to whomever I want, whenever I want. And so there we're drawing some conclusion about constitutional right. That isn't necessarily true, because it's not true that I should be able to say anything to whomever I want. I mean, I could, but I could also potentially get arrested, lose my job, so on and so forth. Okay, and then the next argument is number 14, which is referred to as a red herring. So this type of logical fallacy is a way in which someone aims to distract you from the original claim to truth by way of a red herring. So in other words, the example is you have been found cheating on an exam. So that's the first premise. Second premise is you tell me that you've been going through a family emergency like no other. Then the conclusion is I should give you some leeway on the penalty for cheating. So in other words, you need some leeway because you've been going through these family emergencies, but then in another sense, it might have to do with why you were cheating, but that doesn't provide me with a viable claim that you shouldn't be penalized. Okay, so in other words, it's a red herring. The red herring is that I've been going through some family emergency, but just because you're going through a family emergency doesn't automatically entail that you should cheat on your work for classes. Then we have the straw man argument, which is the last, number 15. This type of logical fallacy is related to the notion that a proposition is either true or false on the grounds of my misunderstanding itself. So in this case, I'm usually unaware of my own misunderstanding on the issue I'm refuting, yet I'm refuting it anyway. So I don't necessarily have to misunderstand that I'm wrong, but this is the structure of the argument. So you might know that the conclusions you're drawing about your opponent's position are not true, but then there's also a possibility that you just don't know that, right? So the argument I have is so the premise 1 is feminism is a viable moral theory in terms of care. Premise 2, some people claim that all feminists are wanting to overthrow the patriarchy and are all Marxists. Therefore, the conclusion, our educational system is overrun by Marxist feminists and should be reevaluated. So in other words, the premises there are questionable, especially when we're making the claim that all feminists are wanting to overthrow the patriarchy and that all of them are Marxists, because that's not true. And so I'm drawing a deductive claim about a case where this is also a problem of overgeneralization. So you could also see too that the types of arguments also overlap, because that could be a problem of overgeneralization. And then we could also see that it's a deductive argument because you're claiming that all cases are such. But we could also see too that it's not sound. So it's valid, but it's not sound, because it's has a way in which the premises are not necessarily true, but yet they fit that structure, but yet it's not a sound argument, because looking at the premises we could see that they're questionable in terms of their veracity. So I'll leave you with that and take it from there. So thank you, and have a good one.